Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to USTA Florida's Here to Serve podcast. It's December, and that means this is our last podcast of 2022, and we decided to flip things around and do it a little bit different. We had put out a request on our social media for some You Ask, We Answer, and we didn't get a lot of You Ask, We Answer, but I am joyful today that I'm joined by Amy Barnhart, who's our Director of Marketing, and she has come up with a list of some of the most common myths or misperceptions about USTA Florida. We thought we'd have a little bit of fun today and answer these myths and do a little bit of a Mythbusters. So, Amy, thank you for joining me. Thank you for all you do to communicate and market USTA Florida to our players, our fans. You do an incredible job, and I'm really excited to have you as my guest today and to do something a little bit fun.
Yeah, glad to be on the front end of this when we're normally on the backside behind the scenes. So thanks for having us.
Pleasure. So what's our first myth? Where do we want to start?
All right. So myth number one is we run the USTA National Campus.
I love this myth. I think we've had this myth since we moved in over here. It's really interesting. So USTA Florida is based, we have a building next door to the USTA National Campus. However, we do not run that facility. It's run by USTA, and that's our national office. However, we do host roughly 20 odd events there every year. So I can understand why people get that perception because we're over there a lot, running a lot of our events. But that facility is actually run by our national office. And whenever we get questions, I am happy to guide them to the right person.
All right. So next myth is you, Laura Bowen, are the CEO of USTA.
This always strikes me as funny at times, sometimes on LinkedIn, or I'll get an email from somebody who has an issue with USTA as a whole, and they make the assumption that I'm the CEO of USTA because I'm in Florida, because the campus is here, or maybe just because they search for USTA executive and I might come up. So thanks to our marketing team, we have really good SEO, and I think they find me first. I am not the CEO of USTA. In fact, we did a great podcast with the CEO of USTA, Lou Scher, and he came over and he joined me for a chat. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, please do. And it was a pleasure to speak with him. But no, I am not the CEO of USTA. I'm the Executive Director of USTA Florida.
All right. So myth busted. Number three. You, Laura Bowen, can change league rules and regulations.
Oh, I get this one most frequently. So there are times, particularly during sectional championships or other things, where someone will contact me and they're unhappy about a rule or regulation or how it was applied. And they do think that I have full control over our league rules and regulations. The truth behind this myth is there is a committee of volunteers who oversee our league program, and they oversee the rules and regulations that we apply here in the state of Florida. So no, I do not have the unilateral authority to change those rules and regulations, but I'm always happy to listen to our players and others who have ideas on how we could do things better. And certainly I enjoy working with our staff and volunteers in that area. But it is a committee-run, volunteer-led program, and those volunteers are active players in our league, so they are very familiar with the rules and the regulations and why they exist, and we're blessed to have them. So myth busted there too.
And no veto rule for you.
No
either.
veto. I do not have a veto stamp either. So yeah, no, it's probably one of the most common misperceptions is that I set those rules and regulations.
Awesome. So number four, we at USTA Florida as a staff play a lot of tennis and we're good at it.
So this could really go either way. There are definitely some people on our staff who play a lot of tennis, play in various programs across the state, and there are some staff who are very, very good at tennis. But you do not have to play tennis to work here, and I would say that we have a wonderfully diverse staff who come from all different backgrounds, many of which are not tennis, myself included. So no, we don't play a lot of tennis here. We don't take breaks in the middle of the day and go play tennis. Although shout out to you, Amy, because I know on Monday nights, you coordinated a little sort of hit around with our staff, and it's been one of the best things that we've ever done, because staff who have different experiences would get to play with each other. And I would say probably in the last 2 years or so since COVID, we've gotten more staff to play tennis than we ever have before, and it's been really fun. So no, we don't play a ton of tennis here, but we do all love tennis, and we're passionate about it, and we're big fans, and we support it every day with our work. So myth kind of busted, but also it could be true. You never know.
Yes, we definitely have varying playing abilities or familiarity with the sport in general. And I get that all the time too. People assume I'm great at tennis. I definitely played tennis as I was growing up, but was never in any way great, but enjoy it as a sport.
And I think that's the best attitude to have. I mean, if we're here to say anyone can play this sport, how great it is to have a staff that's representative of all ages, all abilities, all skill levels. And I think that we truly are representative of that. That wasn't the case when I started. When I started, I think I was the only person that didn't play tennis 11 years ago, and was sort of the oddball out, and I thought, wow, if my experience is what the average person coming to tennis is that, oh, you can't play with us, you're not good enough, then how are we ever going to grow this game? And now it's very, very different. And we're happy to play with anyone at any level at any time. And we try to make it fun. So kudos to you, Amy, because you definitely embody that culture.
All right. So myth busted. We're not all great at tennis, but we do love tennis.
We do.
So the fifth myth I have for you is Florida play is dominated by older retirees.
This is such a myth that has been really pervasive in our state. And I think people really get surprised when, 25% of our play here in the state is under the age of 18. So, a full quarter of our players are under the age of 18. And I think sometimes people are a little bit stunned by that. But we also have healthy participation in all other age demographics. So, I think a lot of it just comes down to where people are at in their life journey. Retirees do play tennis, but they also play a lot of other things. So we're not one thing here in Florida. We're a lot of things. And even since the pandemic, I think our demographic in the state has gotten even more diverse. A lot of people moved here. They might have remote jobs. They decided, hey, why not live where it's sunny all year round and I can go to the beach? So I think for us, that is definitely a myth that we're just a bunch of retirees down here and that's our main demographic. We do cut across all of the age ranges, but we have a very healthy youth population too. So very proud of the diversity of our state in age and other categories.
Awesome. So speaking of retirees, myth number 6, pickleball is the fastest growing racket sport.
I love this myth because it's true in that if you look at the percentage growth, so, obviously if you, use it in terms of small numbers. If you have 2 players and now you have 4 players, you've now doubled your play, right? That's 100% growth. So it's a great tagline and it's really popular to use. But when you really dig into the numbers and you look at the numbers themselves, the true story is that tennis is booming and there's a lot of tennis. No other racket sport can really touch us in the growth that we have. So when you look at in Florida alone, I think we're when the new PAC study comes out, you're going to see we've probably topped 1.6 million players here in our state. Just to give some context for that, since 2017, we've grown by almost 500,000 players. Right? That's a lot. And then when you look nationally, that, we're over 22 million, probably creeping up on 23 or 24 million tennis players. And pickleball, I think in 2021 was at 4.8 million. You see the big disparity. It doesn't mean that pickleball is bad or anything. It's a great activity for people who want to do that. But the comparison is really, it's sort of a red herring in a lot of ways, that people have sort of fallen into, oh my God, it's taking over the world. But the truth is that tennis is having its biggest boom probably ever. Our numbers are really great here in the state, and racket sales, tennis racket sales, I think had their best year ever recently. So tennis is growing. And so while pickleball may be the fastest growing sport when you do the percentage math, when you look at the sheer numbers, I always like to say that tennis is still king of the court and probably always will be.
Awesome. So our last myth ties into a little bit of the previous one, but that tennis is dying.
Yeah. So I think before the pandemic, there were a lot of these headlines that came out in different newspapers, like, oh my God, tennis is dying. Who's going to save tennis, right? And what I find really interesting about that approach to a sport, like, oh, it's going to go away. Tennis has been around since, the 1800s, right? It's not dying. It goes through ebbs and flows like other things do. And I think we live in a world right now where you see the demographics are changing. And I think that shift fundamentally is happening now in a way that didn't happen maybe like during your earlier life or mine, Amy, because Gen X was a relatively small generation. We didn't really move the needle the way like millennials and Gen Zs were. So when you look at sheer population numbers, when you look at economic factors, we went through a recession sort of in that early 2000, like that 05, 06, 07, 08. When you look at the forces at play, and the pandemic really drove this home, is that there's a lot of forces in the world that really drive people toward activities or away from activities or to participate in things. And tennis isn't dying. The question I always ask is, are we evolving with those we're serving? So it's the wrong statement to say tennis is dying, and that it's how are we evolving and how are we meeting needs of the future customer, and are we staying ahead of those trends? And I think the pandemic really shined a bright light on maybe some of the key values that tennis had that brought people to our sport. If anything, we might be having the best moment we've ever had. We're a lifestyle brand. People are wearing tennis clothes, it's popular. The question is, are we harnessing that, and are we preparing ourselves to really serve Gen Z and whatever the next generation is that follows that? And are we really paying attention to that? And I think that we maybe learned that lesson coming out of the 80s and 90s, where we had a boom and we sort of sat in that boom space. In many ways, tennis was stuck in the 90s for a long period of time. Question is, can we move ourselves into the 2020s, into the 2030s, and then rather than sit there, can we keep it moving? It appears that following the pandemic, the growth continues. So we are moving, are we able to accelerate and keep that pace with the world that we're in and really be responsive to how the world is changing? So, I think this one is the biggest myth. No, tennis isn't dying. No, the dooms, dayers saying that, oh, this is just a flash in the pan, tennis isn't going to continue. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think a lot of people were introduced to tennis in the last 2 years that are going to keep playing, and they're going to play for a lifetime. And that's one of the beauties of our sport, is that you can play until you're 99 years old. And I know a lot of the people who came into the sport now will continue to do that. So tennis is alive, it's thriving, and it's our job to keep it that way. So that's where I stand on that.
Awesome. So 7 common USTA Florida tennis myths busted.
Yeah, and if you have other myths, feel free to comment on this video or any of the posts that we do. We always love hearing from our customers, and I know Amy and her team love getting those comments and questions on our social media and other channels. So don't be shy. I always say that. Don't be shy. There's no question is a bad question, and we're always here to serve and happy to answer.
Yes, and 2023 is right around the corner, so maybe you'll see some of your myths that you've submitted on a future episode.
Yeah, let's hope that. And since this is our last podcast of the year, really want to give a shout out to every guest that was on the podcast for this past year. It's been an amazing opportunity to continue this. We've done so many episodes, and we're going to keep delivering these episodes into 2023. So if you have topic ideas or suggestions for us, again, reach out anytime. We're always happy to be responsive to what you all want to hear. With that, Amy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been a joy.
Thank you for having me.
For those of you who are listening to the audio only version of this podcast, be sure to check out our YouTube page or any of our social media where you can see the full video version. And of course, you can visit USTAFlorida.com/here-to-serve for all upcoming topics and dates, and check out our past episodes of the podcast. So thank you all for tuning in. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you in the new year.